In a world driven by finance, maintaining the integrity of banks and financial institutions is crucial for economic stability. We delve into the intricacies of managing banks and other financial institutions, uncovering acts of infractions and explore ways to ensure financial integrity. Our journey begins with a closer look at recent infractions in the financial sector, which activated the Central Bank of Nigeria's countermeasures to replace the board and management of Union Bank, Keystone Bank, and Polaris Bank, all penalized for threatening financial stability of the country. Today, we'll discuss regulatory frameworks and propose solutions to strengthen the financial system. Thanks for joining us. I am Victoria Clinton. Welcome to Nigeria Today. Joining us in the studio to discuss the sanitizing the banking sector is Ahmed Abubakar Tanimu. He's a legal practitioner and a former banker. It's always a pleasure having you on Nigeria Today. Now, Tanimu, immediately you had this whole thing that's going on in the banking sector. I mean, the dissolution of the boards and the management of these banks, and of course the replacement of these of the board and management. What struck you first? What was your thought?
I want to share my personal experience because I've worked in one of these banks, particularly Keystone Bank, and I've witnessed when the CBN had intervened around 2010 to dissolve the board of the bank for various, as a result of the outcome of the examination that was carried out, and they discovered that the bank has a lot of issues in terms of not complying to the provisions of the CBN Act and the basis upon which they were given license to operate. So as a general rule, by section 12, FGH and the rest, the CBN has that power. It has the powers to regulate all banks. It matters not if government has infused funding into it. Once you have been given license, and it's only CBN that has the mandate to license any corporate entity to operate banking businesses in Nigeria. They only have that power to revoke such licenses. They have power to dissolve the board. The board of the bank is the engine room. They coordinate the activities of the bank. And if over time, the issue of corporate governance has been a focal point of the regulators. We want a situation where you have an effective management team comprising of the managing director, the chairman, executive, independent members as directors, people of wealth of experience. Because if you look at it, for any bank to subsist, there are individuals who have either invested in the bank, just like me and you, we call it deposit our funding, and anything that affects the bank affects the entire economy. So the CBN and the NDIC, Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporation, they maintain close watch on the activities of banks. So with this news, is not a new thing. It has been done severally. In fact, some of these banks, like Polaris Bank, have been operating under the guidance of those directors that were appointed by the CBN. What led to this issue at the moment is that the government is trying to now take out the funds, because it's government funds that were used to bail those banks out. The bank, the conscientious and deliberate policy of the federal government, they don't want the banks to collapse. If you look at in the 90s, you have situation where a lot of banks collapse and a lot of people could not even get their monies back. The compensation being paid is quite so. Government made a deliberate policy. AMCOM was created. Those facilities that are overburdening the bank, that people and the customers cannot repay, government injected funding to to keep the banks afloat. So over time, because of the control that the government has in those banks, they were able to appoint directors and management team. But with time, government now needs to take out its fund and dispose of these banks to private entity, so that the monies that belongs to the bank that have been injected can now be taken out through outright sale. So in the process of selling it, due process was not followed. Issue of corporate governance, there's issue of anti-money laundering, where is the funding of those funds coming in from? And the committee set the special investigators mandated by the federal government to investigate the malfeasance in the Central Apex Bank. They've done a temporary report, and it indicates there are serious suggestion that monies used in acquiring those banks did not follow due process, and they are quite questionable. So I think it's the right thing to follow the recommendation of the James Obaze's committee, that those banks should be, the management team should be changed, and the bank eventually should be forfeited to the federal government, because it actually belongs to the federal government. If due processes were not followed, it should be that people should not benefit from proceeds of crime, should not use money laundering, should not use criminal activities to acquire possession that belongs to shareholders and invariably to all Nigerians.
Okay, having said that, I remember the last time you came on this program when we were talking about the recapitalization of banks. You highlighted some kind of shady deals that were going on in banks. Sure. Okay. Now, having had this kind of, this turn of events, how will it impact on customers? Because now some customers are already jittery about the whole situation. If it will affect them, affect their monies, so how will it impact?
I want to assure all Nigerians, particularly those that are having banking facilities, those are banks, those that have bank accounts and the rest, all the changes going on, they are not going to be affected. If you recall, I said the Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporation, they equally have like they've guaranteed to a certain percentage, and the CBN on its own will not want to see any of the big banks to go under, and that is why it's taking proactive and preemptive approach by changing the management board, and this new team is expected, in line with the new rate that everything should be done properly. We believe that it should be able to put the subsidiary bank in the right trajectory. As I said, what normally affects bank is not that there's no capital, there's no liquidity, but you discover that there are a lot of insider dealing. Certain people that are not, they've not made the required criteria for assessing loans, are being given loans, and the repayment will become a problem eventually, creating huge, humongous, bad loan facilities that have gone bad. So with a new management team, with the assurances that we have that the CBN will not ordinarily allow any bank to go under by taking proactive steps, customers should be rest assured their monies are safe. If you notice, there is no any significant impact in terms of operation. If you are using Keystone Bank, you go to the ATM, you can make your withdrawal. All your activities, all your transactions are still ongoing. So there's no, you don't even want to create a situation where people will be afraid and you now have a run on the bank. You've identified the issues proactively, and measures are already put in place to avert any kind of thing that will elicit fear on the part of the customers.
Okay, when you were talking initially from your opening remark, you talked about how they did not comply to the provisions of the Act. And now they said the actions, according to the CBN, said the action was based on a non-compliance of these banks and their respective boards with the provisions of Section 12, C, F, G, and H of the Banks and Other Financial Institutions Act 2020. Now, and the other time you also you mentioned that sometimes some of these banks find it very difficult to comply to some of these provisions. Are there challenges they face in trying to, comply to these provisions? What are they exactly that is making them flout these laws?
The most prominent one amongst the various violations is the records of the banks are being cooked. There's the figures they are churning out. Some of them, they are not actually reflecting the reality of what obtains in the bank. For example, like for this particular transaction, before the intervention of the government, you have instances where facilities that are not performing are now recorded as they are performing. What they do at times is to extend the repayment period. If somebody is supposed to pay for a year and without any proper risk analysis, because they don't want it to appear that the facility is gone bad or there is default in payment, they will now extend the tenure of the facility maybe to about 5 years. They will now give a moratorium period that will not be reflected in the record books. Ordinarily, this shouldn't be a problem if you have cogent reason, but most times you discover that family or friends have been given a loan facility that they know they don't have the capacity to execute a particular project that the loan is meant for. From all intents and purposes, the amount that they assess as loan will be diverted. Because one fact that I know as a former recovery officer is that if you are given a banking facility for a particular purpose, hardly if you execute those purposes you will have challenges, but most times you discover that customers will avail humongous amounts as loan and they will divert it into other things unconnected with the purpose of the loan they availed. And if you now have a situation where top management, that's the management of the bank, are now telling their staff to either not reflect the reality and the state of the affairs of the bank. So you see them declaring humongous profit, and just the next year, some of them, if not for the intervention of the CBN, they will want to go under. In this instance case, you have there is need for due diligence before you acquire a bank. You need to equally, based on the provision of Anti-Money Laundering Act, you need to know the source where such monies are coming from. Due diligence and all other regulatory compliance needs to. So you cannot use proceeds of crime. You cannot use proceeds of fraud to acquire bank. And it's the responsibility of the bank and as well the regulators to ensure that proper processes are being followed. So if you look at it, the major suspect in this case, there's the former CBN governor, happens to be at the helm of affairs. So you see there is the issue of abuse of office, the same thing that ordinarily banks should not be found wanting. You now have it coming from the regulator. I told you that over time it appears that I think it's not quite fashionable any longer to have MDs of commercial bank to now find their way as a regulator. We want people in-house, particularly those that have been in the system, because how do you regulate your colleagues, your friends, your most staff of former banks? They have shares, and it's a desire of any former managing director to acquire his own bank. So you see that urge, the regulatory concern now will be let loose, and that's what crystallizes into what we have. So issue of corporate governance, issue of reporting accurate data, issue of addressing abuses, the code for all this what is expected. You see, for bank is about reputation, is about integrity, is about the confidence that people have, if not for all the measures that the government have taken over time. Before you know it, rumors will start going on. People, before you know, there will be a run on the bank. If all the depositors now approach the bank, they want to take out their money. You recall, bank is basically, bank does financial intermediation. You take from those that have surplus, those that have deposited, and you create risk asset given out to those that need it. So if you have a situation where everybody, based on what is happening and the misinformation that is going around, they will now come and want to take out suddenly, because the normal flow is that you make deposit, when you need it you take it out, but you now have people having a run on the bank. That's a large number coming at the same time wanting to pull out their funds. It's not healthy for any economy. So we should commend the government for being proactive, for being for addressing this particular issue, because bank based work centrally on integrity.
Okay, having heard you talk, extensively about what goes on in the bank and how the past, people at the helm of affairs of the regulatory body have also been found culpable in what is going on in the bank. Now, what I know that you just said the government should be commended and all of that. What more do you think the central bank should do to ensure that situations like this don't arise? And it does appear, like some experts will say, that it does appear that it took quite a while for these things to be, figured out. So what do you think they should do? What kind of collaboration do you think they should be having with some of these banks? Of course, even though some of the bank, officials are also part of these things. So what can be done to ensure?
I think the regulator should focus more on the activity of regulating financial institutions. They should not be a player. You cannot regulate effectively if you are equally a player. You have the CBN giving out so much humongous amount of loans as intervention, still using these same commercial banks. Since they cannot credit your account directly, they credit through the same commercial bank. So how will you, for some that have accessed such facilities, is through interference, through influences and the rest. So you see that level of control will no longer be there. So we want a situation whereby the CBN and all other regulatory bodies should focus squarely, professionally, on what they are being mandated to carry out. That is regulating and supervising the activities of bank. Any bank that is found wanting in terms of, you've already agreed, these are what you need to do, this is your contract, these are the all regulation of and policies of the central bank are supposed to be complied with. So if any bank is found wanting, they should sanction such banks. So they should go back to the era where you have more of professionalism, more of having people with wealth of experience, both retired former bankers from other security agencies, so that anytime they are examining any bank, they should use every available approach to verify the authenticity of the data that are being supplied by the bank. They should not rely on information provided by the bank. They should find a way to go beyond what the bank is giving them. They should have direct access to the back-end server of the bank. So if they require non-performing loans of any bank, they should not wait for the debt recovery officer to provide, because that's where the issue of manual intervention manipulation comes in. If you have a robust and functional IT integrated system whereby everything is automatically generated, and
I was about coming to that
IT
point.
consultants from the CBN that are well trained to be able to verify the authenticity, because you see IT is about programming. So the bank too, we've seen instances where the staff of the bank can do some programming and you will not get the accurate data.
Before you continue, I wanted to say, how well has the regulatory body adopted modern technology to check, for their oversight function?
It's quite slow, but they've made very tremendous effort, but they need to do more. If you rely more on technology, reduce manual intervention, and it goes on the banks themselves. The CBN can make it as a policy that they already have it, but it's not robust enough. You should have it whereby they should have like a dashboard from the CBN where they can see the activities of all banks. In all the banks, there is the accurate data that you can get. Then there is the ones that are being manipulated, which everybody knows. Those within the system knows. So CBN should be able to have direct access to the back-end server. As in, I don't know how to put the term clearly, but they should not rely on data generated by the bank. They should rely on the data that they can access directly from the servers of the bank. And the issue of whistleblowing, a lot of whistleblowing were not actually you see the regulator, because of when we now have abuse of office, a lot of people have made try to get these regulators to intervene in certain areas, and nothing really came out of it. So we believe that if the policies and the programs and the systems are strengthened, all these kind of challenges will be a thing of the past.
Okay, now I was also about asking the question of outsourcing, because some experts have said they should outsource, like you talked about the issue of IT. Sure. If they can outsource it to private firm, they will achieve more results. What would you say about that?
You see, because of the climb that we are, there's enormous risks, fraud and manipulation, hacking and the rest. So for the integrity of the system, we want the CBN should make it as a deliberate policy. Banks should invest heavily in the software that they use. You see, the entire.
No, I'm talking about the regulators now.
Yes,
the CBN themselves.
Where you are now, since you are the regulator, you have the powers to formulate laws. So you set a template that any bank or existing bank must conform to that template. So the softwares that the banks are using, they are being designed by experts in that field. So the CBN should be able to work with all stakeholders so that they should have a robust template. If you must acquire a bank for you to be given a license, there should be certain modification that should be able to empower the regulator to be able to have access to your activity. We should have the we should trust our regulator with our information. So banks should invest heavily to purchase the most modern software to operate the bank. But in doing that, the CBN should make it as a deliberate policy that such kind of software that the banks are going to purchase should be robust enough to allow effective monitoring and evaluation of the activities of the bank. The CBN, a unit in CBN should have like a dashboard whereby they can, at a press of a button, they can know the state of affairs of any bank, and they can verify it using other means. If you have a facility that is not performing and the bank is trying to hide it because of the accessibility of software programs and a robust software platform, the CBN will be able to authenticate such kind of information.
Okay, now looking at the implementation of the provisions of the Act, now I know the past leadership of the CBN, you didn't really give them the pass mark, but looking at the present leadership, what would you say about these regulators with everything you've seen them do in terms of trying to implement the provisions of the Act?
For once, I'm quite delighted and happy at the people at the helm of affairs. If you look at for the NDIC, you have a very experienced managing director who has equally rose from the ranks, having worked in central bank and now heading NDIC. So it means they will have a robust opportunity, knowing from the interface that he has had with those in the banking in the various banks. Those challenges are well known to him, and you have integrity. So that's for the NDIC. For the CBN, we have a former banker and a very reputable banker being assisted by deputy bankers of immense integrity, exposure. They've worked equally in other regulatory settings. So they are bringing their wealth of experience, and we believe with the general mantra of wanting to do things rightly, the management and supervision of all our banks will be quite easy, and we hope to see better days ahead. So
which means customers or Nigerians out there should have their confidence should be boosted, right?
Their confidence should be boosted. We don't have any cause to worry. Things will go smoothly. We just pray for the economy to revamp.
And a stable economy. We pray for a stable economy. Now with that, we wrap up today's episode of Nigeria Today. I want to thank our guests for sharing his thoughts and insight with us, legal practitioner and a former banker, Ahmed Abubakar Tanimu. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
And thank you for being part of the program. Don't forget, Nigeria Today airs weekday at 7:30 p.m. on NTA News 24. You can also check out this episode and others on www.youtube.com/NTA News 24 Hub. Once again, thank you for watching. I am Ikaria Clinton. Goodbye.